Hi, everybody. I know
Hi.
most of your faces. I'm Jen, part of the Marietta campus. And so I know most of you. And I met Michelle once when you had come to the Marietta campus to talk about the upcoming Big Women's event. But I haven't met Mary or Lindsay that I know of. So hello. Um, so, so I have found generally this stay-at-home time to be mostly a blessing. There have definitely been times where we don't know what's going to happen, and we hear of loved ones who are losing jobs next door, aren't sure if they're going to make the rent, or other people who have lost loved ones, or just all the uncertainty. And those can be times when I've felt you know, anxious or just deeply grieved on behalf of other people who are suffering. But for the most part, I've looked at it as a gift. And again, I don't want to say that lightly, because I understand, if you've lost work and you're a single mom, this doesn't feel like a gift. And I grew up that way. I grew up with a single mom who was hard on her luck a lot of times for having the money to pay rent and buy food. So I don't want to discount that or seem privileged or insensitive in any way. But in terms of the spirit, and in terms of, God's, like Pastor Steve had said, within every crisis, there's an opportunity. I've generally felt and sensed that. So we've lived here in California for about 2.5 years. We moved here from Minnesota after having lived in a variety of other places too. And one thing that I had not gotten plugged in with yet here, or found my people yet, was playing music, because I played in a band in Minnesota, and I did the same in Oregon too. And in Minnesota, it took me a while to find my people there too, because you don't want just musicians, you want people with the same heart, and so on. You're just looking for that simpatico thing. And so here I had learned of a musicians meetup group and was planning to start attending, but then the quarantine happened, and I thought, okay. And so my cousin in Minnesota invited me to this online Facebook group called Lockdown Lounge. And I decided to join up with that. And that's where people post songs they do. And so I thought, you know what? That's what I'm going to do, because music ministers to me so much. And I just want to share peace and calming with other people through the songs that I choose. It's really what it is. I don't consider myself an entertainer or anything like that. So that's been a blessing. Also, just having my kids around more. I've got a couple of seniors, twin senior girls, and they're gone a lot, which is fine. I'm happy for them to have a lot that they're involved with, but it's been nice to have them around and feel like they're glad to be around, and not just annoyed and needing to rush out the door. So that's been nice. And we've had I feel like our family dynamic has gotten healthier. Not that we haven't had conflicts and blowouts. We've had a couple and meltdowns. I even had a meltdown myself. So big crying meltdown one night, and I think I needed it. I guess I don't know. I like both being out in the world, and I also like being home. I guess it's just accepting what is appropriate at the time. So, and I've also been getting a bit more into some other things that I do and I'm interested in. So I feel grateful, but I just really sense God's spirit just uniting all of us in our hearts too, across miles.
Aww. Well, thank you for sharing, Jen.
I think for me, this has been a really bizarre time. Well, that sounds funny. It's bizarre for everybody. But unfortunately, my mom passed away about 2 days before school got shut down. So I was already like over there. She was fighting cancer and was on hospice. So it wasn't necessarily a surprise, but I had already kind of stopped my life to be over there and be with her, and been back and forth. And I have 6 kids, so it's a lot to be gone. And so I had been gone, and then she passed away on Wednesday, and actually Friday was the day we found out school was not going back. And I work for a school district as well, not Temecula, but So I found out, I'm off. It was just like one thing after another. And then unfortunately, about a week later, my husband got like crazy ill, not with COVID, but for weeks couldn't get off the couch. So it was kind of this like thing on top of thing on top of thing that was madness. But what's been amazing is support, even despite we couldn't obviously do a lot of things for my like a service or any of that yet, but people sent cards, people sent flowers, people sent us gift cards and dinner, and the Heart to Heart women reached out, and my work, and I felt like even despite all of the madness, there was so much support, and I had more time, I think, to be aware of it, because in a lot of ways I think my normal coping would have been to go back to work and be busy, and I have a lot of kids, so we're busy, just life. I would have been easy, I don't want to say easy, but it would have been kind of just what would have happened. And this really caused me to stop, take time to really look at what grieving looks like. My mom being sick and then my husband being sick really made me look at what does that look like? What's going to happen? And I think through it, it's actually made me more dependent on God. And, you hear that all the time. I think people like, oh, this situation made me feel more, and you understand that in a like theoretical headspace, but the more you go through it and you're like, wow, I would obviously never like to do this again, never like to have those series of events happen, but to come out with more understanding, more remembrance of those things that you knew. I think we know the power of prayer and we understand the power that we have, but sometimes you get busy and lost and you kind of forget it for a moment. And I feel a lot like I've woken up from a really long nap, of life was so busy and kind of just going. And I was still doing things. I was still obviously involved until my mom got really sick. But, I see this like fresh kind of awakening in how I relate to the kids, how I do a lot of things that maybe without this time to really think would not have occurred so much. So I think that's been really nice. It's been hard because I can't just go to work and distract myself from all of these deep thoughts and things, but it's been really, really good that way.
I love that. I think that and same with like Lindsay and same with Jen, we're all coping differently, but there is just that intimacy. I feel like sometimes people are drawing closer to God. Their faith is becoming stronger. They're realizing, that they're being required to kind of slow down. And even though it's challenging, obviously it's challenging for anybody, I think, at this point with what they're going through and what they're coping with, but just the support and the community and this family coming together, and that even the churches, like, we're not in the building, oh, we got to go to church, we're building the church outside of, we are the church, and so we're continuing to just keep those relationships going. I think it's been really, really cool.
Lindsay, my heart really goes out to you.
Me too. I'm praying for you. I'm so sorry.
Yeah,
Thank you.
I can't imagine going through all of that. So,
how is your husband doing now? Is he better, Lindsay?
He is. There's some residual just from being so sick. And my husband previous to this was very, very active. And so for him to like lay in bed for weeks was really bizarre. He lost like 30 pounds in a couple weeks. So it's hard for him because, it's a slow recovery. And I think all of us would have a hard time, but I would say men in general have a little more hard time. They kind of want to just like go and get it to go. So that's been difficult for him, I think. But even he, throughout this, really, when he came out of that sickness, he really felt like, he's like, I feel like God, it was 100% God waking me up.
Aww.
And so it was pretty eye-opening for him too. I think that he really felt like this is a time for us to reevaluate a lot of things and to be reminded of things, and really take that time to change how we do some things. We have 5 of our kids are adopted, so we have a lot of behavioral issues at times, and so things like this really bring out a lot of that. When you have this much loss of my mom, and then loss of school, loss of structure and routine, and then Ed being sick, we had a lot of difficult times with a couple of our kids, and so it's really, really changed how we look at a lot of things, how we ask for support, for help. We definitely depended on a lot of people. So, which is good, because we're not in this, alone. And I think maybe that's what we're learning, honestly, more than anything, as a world. We're not in this alone. Our actions matter, that we have community despite whatever. More people, I think, are getting connected than really probably before. I feel like I'm on more meetings with people than I was previous to this. So I think in a lot of ways we're connecting more and realizing how much we need each other. And I hope that we come out of this with that attitude, intact.
Boy, Lindsay, I don't know how you do it. You're one strong woman to deal with all you've dealt with the last couple of months, and then foster kids too. Wow. My oldest daughter has I go to the women's study on Tuesday morning, by the way. And I saw your email this morning. That's why I'm here. But my oldest daughter has 3 little foster kids, 1.5 years and 4 and 5, and she is going through something just with the 2 older ones. So, and dealing with all the professionals, the social workers, it's just so much to deal with, and I'm amazed that my daughter can deal with it, because I couldn't. But so I know a little bit of what you're going through, and I'm really sorry about your mom. And
thank
being
you.
a caregiver to your husband too. You've worn a lot of hats, for sure.
Yeah, I've definitely had my share of breakdowns.
Did you say that they're adopted or they foster?
They are now adopted. Yeah, we have a sibling group of 5, and we finalized in 2013.
Aw, congratulations.
That's a call for sure.
Yeah.
I think you definitely need to do a testimony some point and tell that story.
Yeah.
Because you told me about it in line at VBS 2 years ago, but I think I just got the Cliff Notes and I was impressed. So
Yeah, it's quite a story.
Wow.
Well, we'd love to have you share it on here. Whenever you're ready, just reach out to either Jen or me, and that would be amazing. Specifically when it comes to fostering or adoption, that in and of itself needs its own support group. It is a whole big giant ball of wax that has many little tendrils that go out into basically every area of your life. And I don't know if you already do, if there is a support group like that. I don't know if Rancho has one of those. I haven't heard of that, but that would be a really phenomenal thing, because there's a lot of people in that boat, and I think you feel very alone.
Yeah, we ironically, we started a study a while ago for adoptive parents, me and Ed. So we have been so blessed in that we know so many families, and the fact that we have so many children. Typically when people meet us, they're like, hey, have you met so-and-so? They have 7 kids too. And so for a long time, if there's other families in town that have quite a bit of kids as well and similar situations, we were introduced to a lot of them. So I was very, very blessed. We recently, like I said, went through pretty significant behavior. And of course, in the middle of a pandemic, is a really hard time to get mental health services. But I was able to call people immediately and, and get help. And I will say that God has been slowly developing a deeper community for me in the last couple years that, I maybe didn't have to depend on as much as recently. And recently I've definitely had to reach out just numerous times of like, I need help. And, I think that's the thing that I think a lot of us struggle with is how do we reach out and say something? I mean, because we have social media, of course, but that's so not the same. And that's people's maybe reaching out or their opinions, but there's no dialogue, there's no personal touch to that. And we may feel less alone because people post things, but I don't know, it's not the same. It's not real, I mean, I post a lot about working out, but I do obviously have a life beyond that. I don't post everything. So I feel like, we know that in our heads, but we still forget when we read it all day. And I think I'm realizing the beauty in speaking things out loud. Like when Satan is challenging you or God's doing things, either way, if you speak them out loud, there's a real truth and a real weight to that versus when you type them, even write them in a journal. Like praying out loud, I think for me has been far more powerful than when I write it down. So I'm just seeing how much we need to reach out personally and speak those things out in a real relationship, not necessarily in a large scale, because I just don't think it feels the same. I'm gonna put my dog away because he keeps barking.
I think it's hard to be vulnerable to that point where you actually ask for help. I think that is really a hard thing for whatever reason. I don't know why what we've done as a society to get that way, but I think being vulnerable enough to say, I'm not okay in a way that doesn't sound like, especially, I don't know that people do it I see it on social media and sometimes that's like whiny, like I'm just looking for sympathy sort of a thing. But the reality of like, I actually am not okay and I need help. Like, can you come over here and help me? And I think that is just maybe we've been taught that is not okay, but that's how God actually designed us, to be able to lift each other up when we need it the most. And so I'm so glad that you have that community, and that's a big lesson for everybody to know that, you develop this community of people that you trust and you can lean on and you have these relationships with. And so in your time of need, they are there. And same, it's reciprocal. You're there for them. They're there for you. It's so important. Like, I was just having a conversation with somebody before this call, and everybody acts like they're all alone. We're all alone. We're doing this thing alone. We're actually not alone. The mail is coming every day. My trash gets picked up once a week. I go to the grocery store and there are items on the shelves and there's still produce in the produce aisle. There are people, we would not have those things if it wasn't for the community at large of people that are continuing to provide things for us. So people, just all this talk about we're all alone. We are not alone. If you were alone, that is a whole different reality than the reality that you're living kind of isolated. And so just acknowledging the fact that literally we don't get through a day without the involvement of community in our lives. And I think that even just that little tweak of thinking kind of opens the door to, okay, well, like there's all these people that are already in our world that provide for us. You're just getting an inner circle kind of that support. So I'm so glad you have that. And that's such an important message.
But even the word isolated is different than it was 25 years ago. If we were going through this, we'd all be on the telephone that's connected to the wall and writing letters with a pen.
Right.
So this is isolated is, yes, I'm not doing all my social things all week long, but just the fact that I'm sitting here on a laptop with a cord that goes into my ear and plugs into a device lets me hear 9 women at the same time. Like, that's weird in a great way.
Yes.
But we have to be careful how isolated we say we are, I think sometimes too, because after living in a third world country, I'm like, oh no, I'm not complaining anymore. This is not isolated. Like,
I used
crazy.
to giggle at my daughter because her husband, maybe 2-3 years ago, got out of the Navy. And she would complain, you know, about him being gone, which, you know, not to negate the fact that she missed him. But when my husband was in the Marine Corps, like, I don't know, 30 years ago, I mean, it was all about, you better be home when he's able to make a phone call after 4 months, you know, and letters. And I'm like, you get to sign on to like because her husband was an officer, so he had all the, you know, they could go on like FaceTime and everything. And I'm like, it's not that bad. You know, I know he's not physically there, but it just would make me giggle a little bit, you know, how advanced we are now, like you say. And that, I mean, even though we all are each in our own homes, we're able to look at each other and sympathize with each other and encourage each other face to face still, you know, not presently, but visually at least, you know. And it's so much different than being on a phone and not seeing facial expression and things like that, you know. So
I think perspective has been important and meaningful, or I don't know, slap on the face or something for me during this time because of everything that we just said. Anytime I get a little inward focused, all you got to do is search your brain or the internet for somebody who is dealing with something that you're not. And, you know, I remember in Mexico, somebody was complaining that their washing machine broke. And our pastor's wife is like, in the 80s, I didn't even have a washing machine. So it's really hard for me to conjure up a lot of sympathy when it broke, and that means it's broken for how many hours until it gets fixed? And then what? You just have a higher mountain of it, but it's not like you run out of anything because you have 50 pairs of everything. So yeah, I'm like, okay, sorry. Yeah, good point. So anytime I get a little like, about something, I'm like, no, wait a minute, look around. Your friends in Mexico would be like, my gosh, how many families live here, you know?
Well, that's what too, like, I mean, if you haven't lived through it, you don't really have like like the frame of mind to maybe necessarily like compare out of what you kind of just know yourself. But that's what I was like joking with my husband. I was like, I feel like I'm like a pioneer woman, you know, like I'm teaching the kids, like, but I do have, you know, my dishwasher and my washing machine and all this stuff. But
in your oven.
I'm like, I just need like my long skirt and a bonnet or something. You know, I'm like, what is all this? You know, I've got my garden in my backyard, and you know, I've got and it does. So it kind of just brings it back to just being simple, like not, you know, I would drop the kids off at school and go meander around Target or Hobby Lobby and go, you know, meet up with friends for Taco Tuesday and, you know, go to the gym. Like I had, you know, my set routine. And so going into this, there's been a lot of like, what's really important and how present are we and what are we doing to like, just kind of build our families up and stuff. And so, but it is, you know, I think we get focused on what we're dealing with and what we're struggling with. Our, you know, sister down the street, or our, you know, like Lindsay's situation, we don't know. And so having this technology and having all of this, I love it. It's been a blessing for sure. I am making a lot more phone calls than I am texting them.
Yeah. There are people too. I know I first-handedly know how hard it is to ask for help. I was a single mother for several years when I was younger and really, really struggling. But on the flip, there are people in the church that's like their gifting to help, and they're just waiting, you know, for the opportunity. And I've turned into one of them. I think it just kind of all started with a few people that helped me when I was a single mom. And then when I got in a position where I didn't need the help anymore, and then I even got in a position where I had extra time, and I'm like, you know what, now I can be the helper, you know. And it's like, if we could just get that courage. I literally being a pastor at Murrieta, I will get calls from people saying, who can we help right now? I mean, there are people just waiting, you know, so it's one thing I pray about, that we develop the courage to ask in the times that we need it, you know, because people are waiting around, you know, to be able to fulfill needs and stuff. So
I agree with that, Rachel. Um, when I was a brand new mom of twins, so I have 4 kids, and my first pregnancy was twins. We were living in Washington State at the time, and all our family is in Minnesota. But my mom was there for the birth, and then after that, my mother-in-law came. This was just days after 9/11, by the way. And I had had a really rough birth. Thankfully, the babies came through really well. But up until that time, I carried full term and had a healthy pregnancy. A lot of the women in our church would say, if you need anything, honey, just let me know. And I had held that in my heart. But once my mom and then my mother-in-law had left, I knew I wasn't healthy enough to care for those babies on my own. And I knew my husband needed to get back to work. And so I picked up the phone and started calling those women. And at first I felt guilty because I was, I'm real independent. But on the other hand, I saw the power of community growing up, because when my mom couldn't make the rent, we would pray about it, and God would bring one of those givers along. $200 anonymous cash in her church mailbox. I mean, just wonderful things. And so I called up those women and kind of arranged a schedule. All of them were empty nesters. So like you're saying, Rachel, they were thrilled to be able to hold babies and help and do. Some of them love to iron. Some of them love to do laundry. Some of them love to sweep. And so that way I could get a little rest and heal and recover more. And after a while, I came to see, you know what? If I hadn't taken those women up on those offers, I would have denied them the blessing of helping out. And that really was a humbling thing for me, because I was physically unable to just fully do all that. And so I really saw that in a big way, and how my being willing to receive their help was a blessing to them. And that was a really wonderful lesson God taught me.
well, it's really, I mean, as the church, it's really what we're supposed to do. And as I said before, I mean, people are, certain people are just kind of more gifted in the area to help at certain times. But I tell people all the time, even if I'm on a personal level with somebody that needs some help, it's like, we can't fulfill what we're supposed to do at this time if we don't know, so we have to just start developing the courage, and chances are most of us have been in positions where we've needed help before, so it's not like we're gonna sit around and judge you or whatever, or think you're weak. Like, there are people that understand even your not exact, but your type of situation you're in. I mean, everything's different, every adoption's different, but there's more of an understanding there. I'm also an adoptive mom, so I'm a birth mom as well. So when I was very young, I gave a baby up for adoption. So, I mean, anyway, there are people who understand the type of circumstance you're in, and yeah, it's just it's even wonderful. Here in my neighborhood, we have a Facebook community page. And even to see this spread beyond like my own church or whatever, someone posted one day and said, you know what? The time is just here. I need help. Me and my husband are elderly and we're health compromised, and we need a few things at the grocery store. And I mean, so many families in this neighborhood were like, I can do it. I've got this. I'll drop it on your porch, And it was amazing just to see that, amongst people that I know. I drive my neighborhood that I know are different religions. They're different races, and they're all coming together to help each other, and I don't know, it's just, I try to pick out the good things in the midst, I believe it's what helps to keep us going. So just to be able to see those few things, even outside my own church body, for me has been amazing, and just provided so much hope, for us as a people. So
Carrie, I'm curious about your blog. Jen mentioned your blog, Carrie. I'm just curious about like what you've been sharing there with the stay-at-home time and what's been
Yeah, I'm curious about it too. Sorry. I have not been writing as much as I want to. But my first goal, so I released one right before this all went down. And so I was like, oh gosh, things are too crazy. Everybody wants to read about all the details. You know, those first 2 or 3 weeks, I'm like, nobody's going to read a blog. Everyone's too distracted and too freaked out and can't find toilet paper. And it was just too much. And so I waited a long time, 3 or 4 weeks before I released another one. And I promised myself, because I put myself in everyone else's shoes, that I would not talk about COVID at all in my next blog, because I feel like everybody else already was. And so I tend to go the opposite of what's happening because as a reader, I'm like, I don't want to read the same thing 80 times, write something fresh and new that gets my mind off of all this. So anyway, just been trying to think of things that have nothing to do with the virus, because I think people are super saturated and kind of over it, reading about different perspectives. It was good 2, 3, 4 weeks ago, but not anymore for me. So like this next one coming up, I'm going to be recommending Mother's Day gifts for everyone to send through Amazon, assuming that no one's going to see their mother. And so I do a lot of recommendation type posts when holidays come around. So I'm scouring and coming up with unusual things, not the typical things. Because when I read a list of ideas, I don't want it to say bath salts. Like, we already know that. Somebody leaving? Who was that?
I am.
Michelle. Okay. Bye. Nice to see you.
All right. Love you guys. See you next week.
All right. Bye.